Frank. What's the weirdest thing you've ever saw in here?
Let me ask you a question, kid. Did you see that movie, Night of the Living Dead?
Hey, we gonna party tonight or what?
Yeah, we are gonna party.
Well, where are we gonna party?
I don't know, somewhere.
Hey, we could go to the park.
Oh, no, we can't. The cops said they'd shoot us if we go back to the park. Yeah, and I ain't in no mood to die tonight.
I like death.
Greetings, Ghouls, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Do You Want to Party? The Return of the Living Dead Movies by Minute podcast. I'm your host, Troy. In this episode, we begin with a roaring lion and end with Take It Easy, Frank. However, before we get into all that, allow me to introduce myself. I am a child of the 70s. I was raised by television. However, it was supervised and a hearty portion was influenced by my parents. At an early age, my parents introduced me to many of the movies that they had enjoyed. I took a liking to the classic Universal monsters, your Lugosi's, Karloff's, Chaney Jr.'s, and such. It didn't hurt that Abbott and Costello ran into them as well. My early experiences with horror were through local TV Saturday afternoon movies, where a host in a costume would show all the classic horror and sci-fi movies from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. However, my love of movies would multiply tenfold when, in the summer of '77, a little movie from a galaxy far, far away opened, and being a kid of the right age, I was blown away. For me, watching movies became my passion. And once a home video machine was brought into our lives, the ability to see anything was now possible. And that opened up even more when we got the Canadian version of HBO called the Super Channel. Back to the home video portion. Well, I loved horror. I eventually made my way through the 60s and 70s. I hadn't really gotten into the now modern 80s horrors. And as a matter of fact, my first experience with modern horror took me 3 separate attempts to watch it. The movie in question was An American Werewolf in London, which I now recognize as my favorite horror movie, and only second to the original Star Wars. Modern horror was beyond my parents' comprehension, so as a 12-year-old, I took it on the task of self-education. My love of wanting to know how movies were done drew me to watching and studying horror to figure out the smoke and mirrors of the whole thing. So while movies like Evil Dead, Friday the 13th, Halloween, and Nightmare on Elm Street were suggested to me, I discovered the zombie genre one Halloween when it aired on TV with the classic George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. To this day, a masterpiece. And its follow-up movies Dawn and Day. But drawing again from the home video recorder and the Super Channel, I randomly discovered and fell in love with the subject of this podcast. My goal here is to try and get across to the audience my enjoyment of the movie. Hopefully be informative and entertaining. And while these first few episodes are going to be solo efforts, I do have plans to have many guests join me on this 91 episode journey. So let's begin. We fade into the famous Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer logo with the roaring lion known as Leo, which Leo was also used in MGM's predecessor, Goldwyn Pictures. The logo itself was created by artist Lionel S. Reese, and so it originated with the Goldwyn Pictures in 1916. And after the studio changed in 1929, and it being the opening logo, it has been the opening logo ever since. However, as of March 2021, Leo is now a CG construct based on the original. This logo marks the only credit of the movie until around the 10-minute mark. It then fades to black, and then the script, showing off the reality of this particular movie. Now, of course, at this particular time, you would see in a normal movie saying, based on a true story, or does not reflect anything and all that. But this one comes right out and states that the events portrayed in this film are true. The names are real names of real people and real organizations, which is a great step forward into the viewing of this movie, knowing that they're probably not going to be pulling any punches. You're going to hear several names mentioned, corporations and whatnot. So it seems like they're not going to be pulling their punches, which is a great start to a horror film. It then fades into the sign on top of a building. Written on the very top script, produced by the National Sign Company, and in big, bold blue letters with black drop shadows, UNITA. Written just below that, medical supply, and with a quote, "You need it, dash, 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 we got it." And then written in script, flanked on either side by cross on one and the blackened map of the United States, "None larger." And then member of Louisville Chamber of Commerce in the very bottom. And when we get a wider shot of the large building, July 3rd, 1984, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Daylights overlies the shot. White, bold lettering. So while the movie, set in Louisville, Kentucky, actually filmed in Burbank, Sylmar, and downtown Los Angeles in California. Now, the reason why this particular podcast is being released on this particular date is because of that particular date that was just posted on the screen of July 3rd, 1984. If you look at your calendars on the release date of this podcast, it is now July 3rd, 2024, marking this the 40th anniversary of that particular day of these particular events. However, the original goal for the release set date, they were hoping to be on August of 1984. So technically about a month after the events that are supposed to take place in this movie. But unfortunately, the final film wouldn't be ready, so Orion Pictures, the distributors, went for a September 85 opening. The idea was to open it in LA and New York, and then put a wider release in October. But due to the test screenings that were so positive, they decided to push it right up to the give it a wide release on August 16th of 1985. So, the building itself, the UNITA Medical Supplies, was an actual supply warehouse located at 698 Moulton Avenue in Los Angeles, California. However, it has currently been turned into private residence, which if you go on Zillion and look up the address, postal code being 90031, you can see that it's been converted into a actual residential area, and you can see that it is, as of May 31st, 2024, sold for $4.35 million. So for 3 beds, 4 bath, and 9,184 square feet. Is it worth it? Well, I guess if you're a fan of The Return of the Living Dead, I guess this will be the most fantastic place for you to live. So the interior shot of, which is what we now cut to, is the actual interior of the building. So, which is a great thing to do because you're saving on location. You can shoot the exterior and the interior as the exact same place, unlike sometimes when they switch to a set and all that sort of thing, but this is actually the interior of the warehouse building. At this point, we are introduced to a few of the characters. We are introduced to Frank, who is played by James Karen, Bert, portrayed by Clu Gallagher, and Freddy, portrayed by Tom Matthews. As for now, I'll introduce the actors and their characters. However, I'm going to leave all the biography stuff to a few episodes into the podcast, just so that I don't slog down the opening. We want to flow easily, get us into the actual movie, because if you've seen this movie, it takes a while before you actually get into the meat of the movie. So instead of slowing down every episode, especially in this upcoming couple of minutes when you're introduced to more of the cast within a minute. It's just going to be a forever long episode. So, within the warehouse, several lights are being turned off by Bert, and Frank mentions how he still has work to do and how Freddy is going to be shown the ropes. As Bert walks away, and he mentions the holiday upcoming. Again, it is the July 4th weekend the following day. Freddy, in his cut off sleeve t-shirt and suspenders holding up his jeans, couldn't look more disinterested in this conversation. Frank mentions seeing Bert at the barbecue the next day, and Bert wraps up the minute with words of advice for Freddy. Kid, no matter what happens, don't name it after me. After then he laughs, walks away, and tells Frank to take it easy, which closes out this particular minute of this movie. In comparison, according to the script, which is The Return of the Living Dead story and screenplay by Dan O'Bannon, which is the revision form of October 1983, which is based on the story and screenplay by John Russo, Rudy Ritchie, and Russell Steiner. So the white words over black read in this version of the script as the events portrayed in this film are all true. Affidavits by the participants are on file with the agencies of the United States government. The names are real names of real people and real organizations. And like the movie, it then fades to the exterior of an industrial district. The sun is more setting at this light, as it says red sunlight streaks across the warehouse. Mentions the large sign, you need a medical supply, you need it, we got it, no larger. Now, the date on the screen that pops up says July 3rd, 1983. And it is followed up by a rumble of thunder. Then it cuts to the interior. Now, at this particular point in the script, it runs pretty much the same roughly as the actual movie. However, in the actual script, Ernie is not listed as Ernie. He's just simply listed as Boss. So basically, the Boss and Frank go through the conversation of the long weekend. However, there is no ending where he makes the joke about whatever happens, kid, don't name it after me, and then saying goodbye to Frank as they leave. So basically, this one ends where Frank mentions, yeah, right, have a nice 4th, see you on Sunday at the barbecue, Bert. So he does call him Bert, but for some strange reason, he's listed as Boss. So I don't know if that's just a misstep, and maybe later on he will come back as being Bert in the script, but I'm basically reading the script along to the minutes, so I'm going to be discovering this stuff at the same time as you guys are. Over on the commentary track, which is the director-writer Dan O'Bannon, and I believe it's the production designer William Stout, it actually begins off right from the get-go. You hear Dan being slightly surprised at the Leo the Lion doing his roar at the beginning of the film, and then he basically doubles down on the fact that this is actual true events. This is actually when the words come up on the screen about that, he says, yes, this is actually true. We took this from actual events, and we actually even used real bodies. After which he introduces himself as Dan O'Bannon, and then the production designer of Will Stout also announces who he is with his voice. Dan then goes on to state how it is, yes, we shot using the facts, and how we actually shot on location. The Unida warehouse is an actual location, and that's where they shot it. The actual sequences, they used actors to reenact the sequences of reality, but that they actually did shoot on location. Then once the actors of once Jimmy Caron, or James Caron, and Tom Matthews actually show up on screen, Dan O'Bannon goes on to say how they were a great team working together. Then William Stout goes on to exalt his praise of Jimmy Caron as well, to say that he was one of the best actors that he ever worked with, and the fact that he would even show up on the days he wasn't shooting just to raise morale. Dan O'Bannon goes on to say that the role that Jimmy plays is the role that he wrote for himself. If he were to actually act it, he basically made the role so that he'd be able to play it at one point. And that wraps up where the actual minute ends for the commentary track. Now, to give you the layout of how these episodes are going to go, I am currently going to be releasing them on a weekly basis. That meaning I'm going to be able to bank quite a few episodes and eventually turn this into a weekly podcast. I just got caught up a little behind on plans, but I figured I will do these thoroughly as best I can. And again, I will be bringing on guests in the future. A good portion of them are friends of mine that are both into the genre of zombies as I am, and are movie lovers as well, and I will get their perspective. I also believe I have on tap a couple of people who have actually never seen this movie in its entirety or at all, and it'll be nice to get that sort of fresh perspective on a movie set back in the 80s and how relevant it can be related to what's going on in the 2024s. While my favorite meat and potatoes of the monster genres is personally werewolves, and I believe that the zombie genre allows one to explore a lot more than the individual movies. Like, you can only do so much with a Frankenstein story, you can only do so much with a vampire story, but you can do a lot with the zombie genre, as in different ways that, first of all, it can be used as a cautionary tale. It could be used as George A. Romero does, a reflection on what is going on politically in the world at the time. As a backdrop, you got the zombie story with the forefront of the problems that arise during the decades that the movies show up in. This particular movie has a lot to deal with, in the future we will find out, that has a lot to do with military mishaps and youth gone wild, and just the dystopian outlook that characters can have, and when faced with disaster, how things could change so quickly. I cannot wait to get to the points where I can explain how on a tight budget this movie was done and such a short schedule, but how the cast and crew came together so well, but still being so much friction as well being in it. It was like a boiling pot of collaboration, and people not understanding what's going on, people not believing in some people, and some people dropping balls and not being able to fulfill what they wanted, and bringing in other people at the last minute. And it was just, it's great. You got a collection of fantastic actors. You got a great supporting cast and crew. And when we get down to the nitty-gritties of, set design and costuming, and like even just the actor selection, is just a fascinating tale to get into, and I can't wait to be able to delve further into this once we get into the actual movie. And that sort of thing I will be leaving until there's a guest with me, because this sort of thing seems a little easier to convey when there is a secondary voice pitching in as well, because other people will have other opinions. And as I am spewing on this off the top of my head, I am realizing, oh my gosh, how could I leave out the soundtrack? The soundtrack itself is going to be something spectacular to talk about, and when we get into the individual songs, I can't wait to deep dive into both the performers of the songs and how the songs came about. And it's just going to be a wonderful ride, and I hope that you stick with us. We've got a 91-minute movie, so we have at the very least 91 episodes, so 90 to go. And I hope you'll tune in next week for minute 2. So thanks for tuning in, and talk to you then. You have just been listening to a Planet Geek production of Do You Want to Party? The Return of the Living Dead Movies by Minute podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, share, rate, and review. You can follow us on our social media platforms. On Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok, search for Planet Geek Productions. On Instagram and Twitter, or X, search for Planet Geek Pod. Or you can simply send us an email to planetgeekpod@gmail.com. The closing theme is provided by Night Chill. For more information about them, see the link in the show notes. So once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, farewell, fiends.